I'm here today at Kearsney College with the president of the KwaZulu-Natal Rugby Union, Schalk Liebenberg, aka Dad. After many years of volunteering your time in rugby circles, you were elected as president in November. What were your initial thoughts and reaction after you were elected to that position?
Firstly, it was an absolute honor to be elected because I've been involved for quite some time, and I've built up a very good relationship with all the clubs in KwaZulu-Natal and all the administrators, and I felt comfortable that it would be an easier task to go forward because I've already got a relationship with everybody.
And how would you sum up the position and what it entails?
Well, if you look at it, it's just about full-time. Everybody thinks it's a part-time position, but you have to be on the ball every single day because things happen on a daily basis, and we're responsible directly to the South African Rugby Union, and then all the clubs in the KwaZulu-Natal Rugby Union are divided up in 5 different areas, which we call sub-unions, and from the South Coast, North Coast, Midlands, Zululand, and then Central, which is the Durban Rugby Sub-Union. And they've got their own presidents and councils that look after them and look after the rugby within that sub-union.
In an ideal world, where would you like to see club or amateur rugby in the next couple of years?
I think if we can get the scholars, as they matriculate, to start playing club rugby, and we start having an influx of more players, only a small percentage of scholars of matriculants, I'm guessing now, but probably about 5 to 6% that used to play rugby at school actually land up at club level. And if we can increase that and start getting the non-rugby playing schools to start playing rugby through our development program, then we could be in for a surprise, because there is such a lot of talent around that is not even playing rugby at the moment. And we can introduce it to them, and they go through the initial stages and eventually end up in the top rugby playing schools, because they've got programs to develop these kids, then we could have a very strong club rugby system. But of course, like always, it's very difficult to develop these programs. There's not enough funds around, and that's why sponsors are an integral part of our game and to be associated with them.
You've spoken about development. Just take us through the structures within the union and how many people are responsible for different levels of rugby.
Well, we've got the KwaZulu-Natal Rugby Union that looks after, they're the custodians of club rugby, and there's a general manager. His name is Siseko Jafta, a young gentleman who used to be a professional rugby player. He got injured, but he was one of the lucky ones who studied while he was playing, and he's highly qualified, and I see a rosy future for him in rugby administration. And then we've got a secretary that looks after the clubs and the normal infrastructure, but I think the main emphasis is actually on the training, coaching personnel. We've got development officers throughout our province, and they develop from the school level, and then they would have trials in the different areas, and from that they would select teams to actually go to a talent ID tournament, which hopefully will take place this year because we haven't got a sponsor yet. And last year we were very fortunate for a sponsor to come on board right at the death, but it's something that's been going for many years. And at those talent ID tournaments, all the mainline schools are represented there with their coaches and scouts, and a lot of these kids actually get bursaries through that. And then they get developed, and I cannot tell you how many of them, but there are many, and pages full, who have actually made the grade, played for KwaZulu-Natal schools.
There's sometimes a bit of a disconnect between professional and amateur rugby, and maybe one of the issues is that the professional players don't play enough club rugby, which sometimes is a nice boost for the players that are amateurs when the guys come down and play a few games before they get back from injury? Would you like to see more of the professional players playing club rugby on a regular basis?
Absolutely. What we do, all our contracted players are divided up into our different Premier League clubs throughout our province, and whenever they are not playing on the bench for the Sharks and their clubs are playing, they are available unless they recuperating from an injury and they actually play for their clubs. And I must say, I watch club rugby on a weekly basis. Every time these guys get onto the field, it's as if they are a magnet. All the other players at club level just go up to the next level to try and achieve what they do, which means our quality is then at a different level. And that's why we're very fortunate to have so many strong clubs in our province. And our championship club from last year, College Rovers, who won the Fidelity Security Premier League, they are representing us at the Gold Cup this year. And if all things go well, I think they're rated number 2 in South Africa. And that's the type of level we would like to achieve in our province within all our clubs.
Just take us through how many clubs you have in the province and the different competitions you have.
We've got the Premier League, and there are 7 teams participating in that. It's actually normally 8, but this 8th spot has not been filled since Impangeni Rugby Club, or as they call them, the Rhinos, withdrew out of the league, and other teams feel uncomfortable to actually take that next step. So we're waiting for somebody to step up to the plate and challenge that position. Then we've got the First Division. We've got a First Division South, the First Division North. The First Division South goes from Margate right up to Ballito, to Pietermaritzburg, and the other clubs are all centralized from Hillcrest, Westville, and the centre of Durban. In the North League, they haven't finalised it yet. They've got there's 9, just to get back to the South League, there's 9 teams in that. And then in the North League, they haven't finalised the league yet, but it's around about 7 teams that plays in the First Division there. Then the winners of the North and South, they challenge each other at the end of the year, and they play for the Dewa Shield. And the champion there, that becomes the Dewa Shield winners, they're entitled to challenge the bottom club of the Premier League. At this stage, there won't be a challenge, and if they prepare to, they can step into that 8th place next year for 2020.
Then, of course, there is a under-20 league, and South African Rugby has made the decision to drop the under-19 league, and it seems like the national under-21 competition will become an under-20 league from 2020. Is that a step in the right direction?
Well, we were hoping that it'll be under 20s from this year, because we had such a great under 19 side last year, with the leadership of Pepsi Buthelezi, who in fact had his first game for the Sharks on Sunday. They won 14 out of 14, and they won the Provincial Cup. So we've got all those players within our rugby circles. Previously, the under-19, the under-20 league in our province was played at full strength for the first round. The knockout cup was also played at full strength. Then the second round was not at full strength because about close to 30 players would be withdrawn from the system to be part of the Sharks under-19s. So this year it won't happen. So it'll be full strength rugby throughout the season. So I can see under-20A and B leagues will be very competitive, and hopefully those youngsters will mature so they can either participate in the under-20 league next year, or if the under-21 league stays the way it is, that they'll be able to make that next step up to that level.
You're just going through all the structures in the province. How would you recommend to a country like the United States, who is still trying to find their feet from a structure point of view? They now do have Major League Rugby, which is a great step in the right direction, but obviously they're dealing with guys that are already in the system, and they need to bring guys through from school and club level. How could, let's say, a state, which is almost like a country in South Africa, how could they set up structures that would bring guys through regularly into the professional teams?
I think if we look at their system, normally we'd like to work bottom up, but with them at the moment, they started at the top. So there could probably be 2 tiers for them. The long-term tier, where they have to promote rugby at school level and at college level. That's going to be their only survival, because that will spread the word and the culture of rugby. If we look at to fast track it, I would recommend that they look at an academy, get youngsters that are already part of the game, and fast track those youngsters into the clubs. And through that, the message will also be spread, hopefully to the lower leagues. But development officers are very, very important. They could maybe use some of the players that plays in their league at the moment to be those development officers, coach other youngsters to become development officers, and then go to the schools and start participating in rugby, even if it's tag rugby, even if it's touch rugby, 7s, 10s, and so forth, and then get into the 15-man game. But somewhere along the line, they have to change their way of thinking and get used to our oval ball. And not American football, when we talk about our oval ball, but in the way that we play our rugby. The masses, the money's there, and I can only see their rugby going forward by huge strides, maybe quicker than any other country in the world.
And you obviously chat to a number of presidents from other unions. Right across the country, what are some of the challenges that the amateur unions are dealing with?
I think firstly, to sustain the game at club level, there are certain areas of our country where players get born because of the culture of rugby there, like the Boerland, for instance, Western Province, Eastern Cape, border. I can just think the traditional rugby playing provinces amongst especially our ethnic black players, and that's why they've got such strong leagues there. Obviously, administration of any area of clubs, provincial, is very, very important. If you don't have those structures right, then it's going to be difficult to manage the rest. And a lot of the provinces have got that right, and that's why they are successful at the top level, at franchise level and club level. So the coaching of not just players, of administrators is vital. So African Rugby Union has got an unbelievable course where you can attend it and actually get a certificate at the end of the day that you are a qualified administrator. And I recommend that to all budding administrators in our country and people who are administrators at the moment. I actually did that course about 2 years ago, and it was an eye-opening experience.
And sometimes, like I said earlier, the professionals kind of do their own thing and the amateur people kind of do their own thing. How could the professional franchises and the unions work closer together to create a better system and to almost have a carrot dangling for those guys that didn't get professional contracts out of school, and to leave that door open so that you can get the odd rough diamond that's developed a bit later?
I think firstly, there has to be a program where the coaches at club level are prepared to learn, and the professional coaches must also be prepared to teach. And we've got a system here where there's an open door. All our coaches can go to the Schalk's training sessions and feed off Robert de Prio, who's the head coach, and his assistants, and they're quite prepared to speak to the coaches, and they can shadow them as long as they want to. And they can take that experience back to the clubs. But getting back to the players in the rough diamond, we still have a system where we have trials at age group levels. So the youngsters who weren't recruited from school level into our academy, we're very fortunate to have a very big academy, and play club level amongst all those top other players. Our coaches at age group actually go and watch all those games. We try and get all those games at a centralized venue, so it's much easier for them to look at all the players at once. And then we'll have trials, and eventually the final team and squads will be selected from that. So everybody will actually have a chance to, even if they weren't part of the system to start with. And the last few years, there's always been a rough diamond, one or two that's come through the system.
And then finally, generally you say the more professional an organization is, the better, but schools have been criticized slightly for almost being too professional. But having said that, school rugby, and being here at Kearsney today, one of the top schools in the country, has been the lifeblood of South African rugby for a century. So just a word on the school structure and how important it is.
I think if we look at the national crisis of education, the schools play an absolute big role because they lay the foundation for everything. So we've got no conscription anymore in our country, and I just believe though that 1 year, 9 months or 2 years that everybody did just gave them that foundation where a lot of discipline got instilled into the individual. And the schools actually have to take that space now, and by supporting players, promoting sport in overall, promoting cultural days, and also number one that we must never forget, that everybody has to study and do their best in that, because it doesn't matter if you're a professional sportsman, one day that will end. And if you didn't prepare for the future in any other way, you're going to have a problem. So I think I don't agree with poaching athletes or students from other schools, but if we do it at the right time, at a young age, then that kid will become part of the system. Because we don't want mercenaries in sport. They must still have that good heart feeling about where they belong. And there's only one way to do this, be part of the system for many years.
And now for an encore question.
Yes.
Just looking ahead at the year, any innovative ideas that you and your exec have come up with?
Well, I think the one thing is communication, the other one's trust. And then of course, if we get past all of those, then we've got to start looking for people that will like to become part of our system, which means we will have to have joint ventures with companies where they can support us in all our different programs that we have, and eventually make club rugby much better and bigger and a showcase to everyone.
Well, let's make club rugby great again. Schalk, thanks a lot and all the best for the year.
Thank you, Brenna, and good luck with your program.